Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, or whenever you happen to be listening to this. Welcome to the Film Realist Podcast, Spooky Edition. Ooh.
Ooh.
This episode, if released on time, will be released the day before Halloween. And while everything through the sun is getting delayed, it's fortunate that my guest today doesn't really go to the theater very often. And this fits in with what you were on last week. I'm joined by Brian Maneely of Jump on the Bat-Wagon. You're back.
I'm back, and
Yeah.
I feel like I should have, like, some kind of, like, additional something underneath that, some kinda additional line, but no, I'm back, hi, hello.
Yes. Very excited to have Brian back on the show to talk about The Batman, which was released. When was this? I should know this. I think it was March of 2022. So there was not a Film Realist episode to cover it, and I figured why not do it leading up to Halloween, as the film may or may not take place during Halloween.
Yeah, it
Before we
seems
get
like
started,
day
go
of,
ahead.
right? Like, the first day that we see seems to be Halloween.
Yeah, is Halloween. And so that I think the first like 7 minutes were released on YouTube prior to the film coming out as a marketing strategy, which was quite interesting.
Oh,
I don't want to bring the episode down, but I haven't publicly said anything yet. And so day of recording this yesterday, the it was I wouldn't even say it was announced, but it was this sucks. I hate doing these, but this has been a hard one for me. That uh, Matthew Perry has passed away at the age of 54. And I tweeted about this last night when I found out. And Friends is a sitcom that holds a really special place in my heart. It was the first real show that I connected to with my mom. And Matthew Perry's portrayal as Chandler Bing is a character that I probably steal most of my comedic timing from. And so it's tragic to have lost him so young. I just recently finished his book, which is such an eerie reflection on everything that's happened throughout his life, and particularly even in the prologue, talking about what he's lived through and what he's gone through, and getting to the self reflection moment and finally finding purpose. And for that to be gone so soon is it's gut wrenching. And Friends as a show touched millions of, probably billions of people, and it's one of the elements that I think is just going to be happening as I get older. I saw a meme the other day that really hit home for me, which that said, "I'm a '90s kid," and it said, "No, you're not. You're a 30-year-old man." And I'm certainly somebody who feels that way at times, but even the people in my life who I always thought were just 40 are now getting to be 80 in my
mhm.
grandparents' generation. So I know that selfishly, Matthew Perry was half Canadian, and so I will take that with a point of pride. But however you choose to accept or absorb or process anytime a celebrity passes away, I know it affects people completely differently. Some people not at all, and some people may be sobbing for days. Because I know Friends particularly holds a special place for a lot of people, as it does with me. It's one of my favorite sitcoms of all time. I own the show on multiple mediums, and I have the two Lego sets that were released over the last couple of years. So
I'm not at all surprised.
no, yeah. I mean, I we went over this off of the or when we weren't recording. Just a little I guess behind the scenes tidbit for everybody to lighten the mood. So Brian and I recorded the episode for about an hour and then persisted to talk for 3 afterwards. To my time, I think it was 2 in the morning. When
Yeah, it
we
was it
decided
was
to hang up the
really late.
call. Yeah,
I was
and
watching the hours tick by and being like, "I'm tired. How is he doing? How's he still
how is he
going?"
doing? Yeah, I don't know how, but I'm fortunately we're going to be talking about something that connects to both of the stuff we talk about relatively frequently with DC films and
Mhm.
Batman in particular. So, rest in peace, Matthew Perry.
Yeah,
This
I
episode
hadn't
could,
heard that.
yeah, it kind of happened. I popped up during one of my friends' messaging threads, and then you do that thing that everybody does now where you're just trying to find a viable and reliable source.
Mhm.
And yeah, It's going to be hard for me to talk about, and I don't think I fully processed it yet. One of my ways of kind of getting through this stuff is just binging whatever the thing was. And I talked to James about it when I got to that episode, and I talked to you about it off the episode. That hearing James's reaction to Kevin Conroy passing away was like a lot. It lifted something I didn't even know I had still been holding on to. And so celebrities, comedians, any artist in general, art in is such a subjective medium, even though we give our opinions on it. But that's what we're gonna do for fun anyways. And so
Mhm.
when humor manages to affect so many people, I am definitely somebody similar to Chandler Bing that makes jokes when I'm uncomfortable. So I'm gonna do that, and we're gonna talk about a guy dressed up as a flying bat. So as
Let's
per
do it.
usual, there will be time codes in the description that even though this film is over a year old, I still know people that have not had a chance to see it. If you have streaming services, it is available on Crave here in Canada, and it is available on Max, I believe, in the United States, and then probably other
Yep.
ones. I did not look into where they are. Probably Sky, I think that's what it's called in the UK and Australia. But if I'm wrong about that, you can send me an email. Whatever, it's all good. I didn't look that far. But anyways, we will be talking about The Batman, which was directed and written by Matthew Reeves, or Matt Reeves, as he's known publicly, who made two of the three Planet of the Apes reboot films and stars Robert Pattinson. So we're going to have a non spoiler section, and we're going to have full spoiler details listed. I don't expect the non spoiler section to be very long, but regardless, we're going to do our best. So without further ado, let's jump into The Batman. So we're talking about Batman, and I can't see anything because this was designed for a child. Let me see if I can get it on. This will probably be wind up being the social media thing I do for this, but I don't even think it fits me properly. This was bought for me by my sister-in-law. So
Oh my
I
god.
wanted to wear it because it has lights around the eyes. So you're gonna have to look at if there's a clip of this somewhere. But it also deepens my voice. So we'll do one audio clip just for the nightmare fuel that this will be. Is it gonna work? Or are we dead? We might be dead. Oh wait.
No.
Oh, there we go. Oh. All right, so we're talking about the Batman.
Oh my god. Nightmare fuel indeed.
I am vengeance. All right, that's enough of that. All right, that'll be for later. So without getting into any specific details, what I find so interesting, if
Mm.
you are listening to this because you listen to Brian and James on Jump Off the Jump, I always want to say off, but it's on because it's the first time you're doing it. But Jump on the Bat-Wagon. You were
Jump
somebody
off the
who,
Bat-Wagon this favor, quit the podcast. Then
there
we're
you
just
go.
gonna jump off the Bat-Wagon last episode.
It's one of those things where I could completely understand if at some point it's like, oh, we're in the midst of something like, I don't want to do it. And if that's ever the point, you never want to do something out of obligation. If you're not enjoying it, then don't do it. But
Oh,
regardless, well,
James wouldn't let me quit the podcast even if I wanted
that's
to,
true.
but luckily
Yes.
I'm having a good time and I have no urge to quit.
Well, there you go. So I'm gonna clip this and post this when it's like, unfortunately, we could not get through the Zeta project. The end. Uh, sorry, Maddie.
That's one of the ones I know that's coming up that I'm actually looking forward to learning about the Zeta project because I've had so much to do with the Watchtower videos, like on the behind the scenes,
Yeah,
that I kind of have some very basic understanding of Zeta project, so I want to see what it actually looks like.
I don't think I've ever watched it because I know it's canon. I think Static I got through. Anyways, but back to why I brought up
The Batman.
the Batman and Jump on the Batwagon is famously on those episodes. You were very disappointed by the portrayal of the Riddler and Diet Riddler, and so
Yes.
I didn't even think about it when I suggested it because I was just like, "Hey, Brian, I'm gonna say we're friends. You can break my heart and say we're not." Uh, but
Why would I say
that
that?
Well, that's fair. You're a kind soul.
We
I
had some
appreciate
we
that,
had some
Brian.
severe bonding in our after recording, I think.
That's true. I was gonna say we talked about a lot of things. But anyway, your expectation on a script involving the Riddler requires a certain level of intelligence that it can't just
Yeah.
be like, this is upside down or and whatnot. So I found it really interesting that without even thinking about it prior to asking you to do it, it's a Riddler movie. And in terms of the portrayal of the Riddler, it's a very unique one. Now, I'm gonna
Yeah,
spiel for a little bit, Brian, and then I want to get to yours because, quite
go
frankly,
for it.
I want to hold off. You messaged me, and I quote, "Just finished it. I have things to say." And as selfishly, I want to delay that for as long as possible, even though we have a ticking counter on Zencaster. But I'm really hoping we don't finish using that. Anyways, which is Batman in particular, similar to Superman in film reception, varies all the time, and it's become much more of a vitriolic place, which is really disappointing. One element of the character in general, I would say with the Trinity, although Wonder Woman clearly has had less adaptations, is that the reason these characters are able to survive what will be, we're at 85 years now, I believe, with Superman and Batman, if not close to, yeah, 2024 will
Wow.
be 85 years for Batman, is the flexibility and how that character can be portrayed in so many different facets. My favorite live action version of the character is Ben Affleck's because it fits most with the idea that I had in my head when reading the comics. Some of that is from the visual medium of him being 6'4", 240, because he is a
Mhm,
beast of a human being. But
mhm.
being somebody who really enjoys detective noirs, stuff like Fight Club, Seven, everything that the Batman was marketing leading into the release in March, and with the delays, this film did, of course, shoot through the pandemic, and so my expectations were quite high. And I have to say, even with revisiting it, I can appreciate that there are some fair criticisms, and people in general will be like, "Well, that's not Christian Bale's Batman. This isn't Ben Affleck's Batman. My one Batman is the true Batman," which is just, you're everybody is entitled to not like what they like, but the fact that we can at least get different versions shows that these characters can survive different iterations. And one element of this that I really like is getting a film where Batman actually is the lead character, which, similar to our discussion with Mask of the Phantasm, most Batman films throughout the live action iterations, period, and including Mask of the Phantasm, Batman is rarely the lead. There's like two that I would say he is, with Batman Begins and then this with but even in the most famous versions, Batman 89, it's Jack. That's Jack's movie. And then vice versa, you
Mhm.
have all the other villains taking up more of the screen time. I think Batman is in Batman Returns for like 26 minutes or something. Like, it's not a lot. And so
Wow,
having this,
I never thought about that.
yeah, it's insane that that's the case. And so having this detective thriller with the great detective, The Dark Knight, I really enjoy the movie. It is certainly long and really does feel like you're experiencing almost a mini series or an extended graphic novel. I like that it was something unique, and given that we are getting a Penguin miniseries to kind of explore the in between between the Batman and the Batman Part 1, which we know nothing about in terms of what's going to go on in the sequel, but knowing where this movie ends, I'm really looking forward to that. And each, particularly the portrayals of each of the characters being so different, but yet really faithful to specific versions of the characters, particularly Batman Year One, is where most of Catwoman's influence comes from, as well as the Long Halloween, which has been influencing a lot of Batman recently. The Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale comic book, and Robert Pattinson, who went. My favorite thing on the internet is the day a Batman actor gets cast, because it's always, they've only ever done one thing. How can this be good? And that is never the case with anybody. Go all the way back to Michael Keaton. You can go through, I think Christian Bale, just people are like, who? But in general, Ben Affleck, Robert Pattinson, whoever the next one is, it's always they can't do it. That's not going to work. And Robert Pattinson post Twilight has really done a lot of art house films and shown the the range that he has as an actor, and being a moody, grungy Batman, I think it works really well in this. There's something I do want to talk about that I can't yet, I don't think, because I would consider it a spoiler. So that's my spiel. Overall, I enjoy the movie quite a bit. I think it works really well as being a new interpretation of the character. And as I said already, I'm looking forward to more. So, given that, Brian, you said you
Mhm.
had some things to say. What do you have to say?
How much time we got?
We got 57 minutes.
Not enough. Um,
No, it's not, but we're going to have to make cuts anyways.
it's all good. It's all good. So I was very intrigued with this movie. It was I mean, we're in full spoilers now, right?
We aren't, but we can get here. You know what?
Oh,
I've given my here to save Brian to having ruined a movie that came out over a year and a half ago. That's the general thoughts. Brian wants to get into spoilers, so we can, and that's fine. So after the little fun transition we have, I don't know what it'll be. Actually, you know what? I'm going to tell you now. It's going to be the sound of the Batmobile revving up. That'll be this week's transition episode. So,
good
so we're gonna
choice.
get into that. We are now in full spoilers for the Batman, which features the Beast, which I own in Lego form and Hot Wheel form, which doesn't have as a nickname as a car, but I'm calling it the Beast because it yells at you and it's terrifying. So we're
It
in full
was yeah.
spoilers. You may unleash, Brian, your
Okay,
thoughts.
well, unleashing the beast because 'cause we're there. That was I like kind of don't mean to be, but I'm kind of a gearhead and I love old muscle cars. And
Mhm,
so when this showed up, I was like, what is that? And I could hear that there's two different like there was like an internal combustion engine, like your classic muscle car. And there's also like a jet turbine sound over the top of it.
mhm.
But oh man, I was enamored with the car. I was like, yeah. And that car chase was insane. But to try to not go so chronologically sideways here, um, the movie itself, I was really happy to have an excuse to watch it, and there was a lot that felt really unique to me. Um, I I gotta say, after the movie, I went on and I just wanted to learn some more about it, and so I was looking up like IMDb and stuff, and went to Rotten Tomatoes and saw that it had a really, really great reception, and just reading about what people had to say about it. And man, I didn't like it.
Okay, that's
It
fine. And
was yeah.
I think
What were you
one
gonna
of
say?
so we're in full spoilers, and I'm not surprised. I have heard that from quite a number of people, which again, it's one of the benefits is to have the conversation. Like I'm not like podcast over, bye Brian. But um one of the criticisms ironically came from the voice actor who would go on to play the lead in Batman Beyond, Will Friedle, which you will get to at some point, also known as
Okay.
Eric Matthews from Boy Meets World, which was he really
Oh,
did not enjoy that Bruce Wayne does not exist in this movie, just in terms
the
of
Bruce Wayne like as in Bruce Wayne being the like more like charismatic Bruce Wayne that we know in like BTAS and stuff like that or what?
yeah. I think i think given the fact that this film lacks the duality that most people are accustomed to, right?
Mhm.
And one of the elements that I actually quite enjoy that is the case is so often you're given the origin story, the gun with the pearls and whatever, and it's been done
Right.
to death. And even as we talked about Mask of the Phantasm, I'm going to plug that other episode because I really enjoyed it. But getting to see an origin story is great for a version of the character you really like, and you get that depth of character and his experience throughout what is, I guess, 20 year or 10 years of an experience. And no, I guess 14, and then would continue to be
Mhm.
more with the other films, but specifically with the BTAS version of Batman. But this Batman being somebody who's had the origin story and you're diving into that, I liked the fact that, and typically if you listen to writers discuss Batman, and it's similar with Superman, which is like Clark is who Clark is. Superman is the
Right.
presentation, right? And Batman is who Bruce is. And then obviously the party boy is who he puts on for the world. And the fact that at this point in Bruce's career, a year in, I believe it's supposed to be, if not two,
Mhm.
he sees no need for the duality. It's like, I'm on my mission, right? Like not to say that these things are even remotely the same, but like he's a serviceman, right? Like, I have a job, and it's one of the elements I liked about the film so much, and it's one of the scenes everybody reacted to, I would say genuinely positively, which is the I am vengeance scene, which was in the first trailer where people went, "Oh, Edward Cullen can be Batman from Twilight." And that arc, well, I could see some people saying that it's a little muddy through the whole thing. I was actually reading up something that had to do with the conclusion, which is almost that this entire film is his baptism from vengeance to becoming more of a symbol of hope, particularly
Mm.
with his relationship with the mayor's son. But I want to know more about what you didn't like it, because one of the elements that I love having a conversation with somebody about a film, even if it's one I don't like and that they like, or flip it vice versa, is
Uh-huh.
perspective is really important. And like, you being somebody who's more into cars, and that's not how that works to some degree, and jump on the Bat-Wagon, I'm curious, like, what elements for you didn't work? What did? Like, I'd like to.
Cool.
People hear me talk all the time, so I want to know what worked for you and what didn't.
So I mean, I really appreciated what you were saying about like kind of the depth of Batman and where he's coming from. And I really liked that. And I liked the story arc. I liked that it wasn't the stereotypical, oh, Bruce Wayne's parents got killed and now he's this and now he's the Batman. Like it was interesting to see a different side of that. I really liked that. I think my biggest gripe, and to sound so shallow, is actually having Robert Pattinson as Batman, cuz I feel like not the fact that he wasn't able to go between this like charismatic playboy to, I am the night man, not to do
I
a
am what
oh,
is it?
always sunny.
What is the jump on the I am the what do you guys say?
Oh my god, I am oh shoot, I
What
am the
it,
tiger, I believe in God, something like
that's
that.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Um, but it was the like I haven't seen Twilight, but it was so hard for me in these moments where it was like, they had the monologuing over the shots of the city was like kind of cool, but it just felt to me like it felt like it belonged in Twilight. Like here he is being Robert Pattinson being really kind of emo and he's dark and he's hunched over and he's got the like I wiped off my eye makeup, but I've still got the raccoon thing. And he's just
But
really like,
so
oh,
that's
I'm
an
just so
element of
morose.
realism I'm glad they kept, because it is in
Yeah.
every single version where they go, where's my mask? I had one. Where they go, "Blah," and it's like beautiful hair. No, and it's like, we all know you're doing it. Like,
Right.
there's one in Batman Returns that is the most famous, where he to quote, I think it's the Weekly Planet, talks about, he pulls off his fruit roll up textured mask, and he's like, there's no eye makeup, and like, it's a continuity error that, yeah, it is
Oh,
certainly.
yeah.
And I get the, well, to fit in with the moodiness, and one of the elements that I think is very divisive, and I can like, is it my favorite version? By no means, but I think if you had just introduced another Playboy and then I'm Batman secretly, like, ugh, that I think it would have come across. There could have been potential for that to be more cheesy to some degree, and like, I like the elements of the fact that, like, Matt Reeves has talked about, he was listening to Something in the Way when working on the script, and you can see like a lot of the Kurt Cobain ismness in the film. It's
Yeah.
certainly a particular take, and I can understand why it doesn't work, because for somebody, and this is not a criticism, because going into a movie, you have to take into consideration, like, how is this going to work from a mass appeal standpoint, that, and you've talked about this on Jump on the Batwagon, like, your exposure to DC is significantly more limited than your Marvel stuff, all your Marvel cards and whatnot. Like, the
Right.
quote unquote best version of the character, I would argue, is the BTAS DCEU version, where it is such a distinct character, right? You get Bruce, you get Batman, and you get to see that emotional range. We talked about this on Mask of the Phantasm. Cut me off when you
Yeah.
absolutely would like to, with him talking to the tombstones about being happy. And
Mhm.
a criticism that I have of the film is, while I think Robert's portrayal of Bruce Wayne with this man on the mission, I quite enjoy it, and I like the significance we get with somebody who's completely blinded to everything else. Is even his relationship with Alfred is very I wouldn't say toxic, but combative at times. Like, he doesn't look at Alfred until much later in the film as some this actual father figure in his life, where
Yeah.
he does kind of look at him as the help, which is certainly not something we see regularly. But in
No.
doing so, you lose you don't the audience doesn't get to see Bruce in his portrayal. And I think that does hurt the film, where we are only seeing Batman until there's like two
There's like
sequences where we
one.
really get to see
Yeah, the
Bruce.
the funeral scene and where he goes to speak to Falcone. Those are the only
Exactly.
times
And
that you get to see him. But he's got that same like, "Oh, I'm a vampire and I can't go out at night or can't go out during the day. Oh, I got my
sure,
hair hanging in front of my eyes and I'm just kinda a little bit goth and a little bit emo." And it just like something to me of like, Playboy Bruce switching to Batman kicking ass is more believable than, "Oh, man, the world's so dark, and I listen to My Chemical Romance too. Now I'm gonna mess up the world." Like, it just
sure.
it didn't land for me, you know?
That's fair. Yeah. All right.
But, I do like I don't know, I don't wanna be I don't wanna just be totally negative this whole time. I mean, there was a lot that I liked about the movie, and I would love to move on from that one thing, which again is
Okay.
kind of a hinge pin for me, of course, but, there's still
Yeah,
there was a lot of good in the movie.
him being the titular character, I think that, and again, there are versions of the character that, and I'm not saying this is the case for you, but this has been my experience, where initially I went, no, that's not the ones I like. Particularly, the two examples I would have is the Adam West version of Batman, where
Uh-huh.
I wouldn't say I didn't get it, but it just wasn't it when I wanted it to be it. That's a
Oh,
terrible
yeah.
sentence. But moving
No, no,
forward
it's
with
perfect.
exactly. When you eventually got the two animated movies with Burt Ward and Adam West, Batman Return to the Cape Crusaders, and then Batman versus Two-Face, where Two-Face was a character they weren't allowed to do on the TV show, but then they were allowed to, I don't know why, but then they were allowed
Hmm.
to do it for this animated home video film, and William Shatner plays the Adam West Batman version of Two-Face. Like, it's perfect. It's chef's
Oh,
kiss,
wow.
where it's like Batman, like bleh, like it's just he's just kirking the whole thing. It's incredible. Like it's amazing.
Kirk as a verb, I like it.
Yeah, Kirkism. And then with Batman Brave and the Bold, which was a passion project of James Tucker, who you would only know currently as he was a storyboard artist for Superman the Animated Series, and then kind of
Okay.
progressed in being a producer for Beyond and Justice League Unlimited. And so
Sweet.
it's the that other version, which was voiced by Diedrich Bader, who was in the Drew Carey Show and has done a lot of other voice work.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's like a Dick Sprang version of Batman, and I've grown to appreciate those different versions. Speaking of versions, the segue didn't go as clearly as I wanted to, but we're gonna keep doing it within it. Is it anyways? We John Glover's Riddler is awesome, and it's a very different Riddler than Paul Dano's Riddler. What did you think of that?
Yeah, okay. So I was definitely more pleased in the Paul Dano's interpretation of the Riddler than anything we've seen with that Riddler or Riddler in BTAS. Um it was cool because again, this leans more towards what I was saying on the jump on the Batwagon. It's hard to say, isn't it? Jump on the Batwagon podcast.
The Watchtowers podcast, where I watch the DCEU. Like, that would have been a terrible title, but it would have been the most apt title. James made me do the thing, the podcast.
That'd be easier too. But yeah, it was cool to see stuff that actually had like it was multi layers. It wasn't just puns, it was like, okay, well, I got to figure this out. And there was a lot of stuff like, getting by people. And I'm like, okay, that seems to me more of what needs to be. Um, I even towards the end of the movie, I was kinda kept guessing by the character because there was I got actually thrown off where I was like, "Okay, we got Paul Dano." What was I wanna say? Dano, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dana Delaney
Um,
plays Lois Lane and was in Mask of the Phantasm. Paul Dano
oh, no.
is the actor who
Oh,
plays the
no.
Riddler. So have fun with that.
Yeah, so Paul Dano, up towards the end, I was like, "Okay, well, he's the Riddler, he's the Riddler, he's the Riddler." And then when it came to the whole kind of battle in the crowd when they were in the arena at the end,
Mhm.
he unmasked that guy who had the shotgun, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Wait a minute, is that actually the Riddler?" Like, it caught me off enough that I wasn't certain anymore that Paul Dano was the Riddler, and, like, maybe the real one was out and about somewhere. So I think the writing was way better, way, way better with this. What did you
Yeah,
think? What do you think
it's
of the Riddler?
well, so Paul Dano is an actor who's popped up in a bunch of films I absolutely love.
Mm,
Some I haven't, but particularly I did recently my top 5 science fiction films of the 20th century, and Looper was in that, which was everyone's favorite non-controversial Star Wars writer and director Ryan Johnson. I say facetiously. And so Paul Dano was in that, and then Matt Reeves. Ironically, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes was also included in that because, and I've stolen this pseudonym for the film from Screen Junkies, which was the Thinking Man's Blockbuster. So when Matt Reeves was announced to be making the Batman, I was
uh-huh.
totally on board because he treats these characters with a maturity and respect and puts in the work to make these films that have these layers that you don't get in every version of a major blockbuster. And so having a the David Fincher isms and look of this movie slash Chinatown, like one of the elements I like so much about this and what works so distinctly from other versions of Batman is one, this is the most disgusting, wet, steamy Gotham we've ever seen. And they went to
Yeah.
Scotland to do so. And then having
Oh,
a
sweet.
yeah, and then having a serial killer Riddler has always been one of the versions that has kind of been teased here and there. It typically doesn't lean into this as heavily, and it's one. So this is going to be controversial, and I know it's going to be. So clip it here if you want, listeners. Is that I think The Dark Knight is a very well made film, but because Heath is so great, I think it props up elements that don't work as well as they do in the first Batman Begins. The plot structure is exactly the same. And so having that interrogation scene and the one thing I wouldn't say challenge, but I'm going to say I would push back on with the portrayal of the grunginess of of Robert Pattinson's Batman is the subtlety in the performance is unlike anything we've gotten from a Batman actor before, particularly in a sequence near the end where we are in what was Riddler's like headquarters, I guess, after he's again, we're in full spoilers, has killed Carmen Falcone, who is played
Mhm.
perfectly by I almost said Tony Shalhoub. That is not who it is.
John
John
Turturro.
Turturro. Um, and
He's
the the
amazing.
menace he is able to deliver is spectacular. But seeing Bruce, I mean Batman slash Bruce looking around and him starting to connect the dots that what if the Riddler knows who I am and this whole thing I've been doing is over? And the whole
Mhm.
performance, because he's wearing a mask, is just in the eyes. And that leading into the conversation he has with Edward Nashton slash Edward Nigma. I think Nashton is technically his actual name if you go by the comics. Yeah, it is. It later changed to be Edward Nigma. Um,
Okay.
and I love the question mark in the latte. I think that's ridiculous, but yes, please do so. But him having that conversation and the tension, and I still you can feel it in Batman as he's talking about the Waynes and everything. He's just waiting. It's like he knows, he knows, he knows, he knows. And for that realization that,
Yeah.
oh no, this guy is mentally unwell and thinks we're in this together hasn't and is a brilliant tactician based on everything he's done so far hasn't been able to
Yeah.
he doesn't know I'm Bruce Wayne. And that subtlety is you and in other versions, it could have been done to be like over the top. Like you would have seen like it done where it's like maybe there's more physicality, like he shrugs down or the posture disappears. But for the whole performance to just be in his eyes is, I think, a testament to what Robert Pattinson is capable of. And I'm hoping for in the future, we do get to see that duality because I think it would add a more accessible range to be portrayed, which is, I think, something
Yeah.
most people would be in favor of. And so the serial killer element, and I'm somebody who is a big chicken and skittish when it comes to horror films. So there to be these like saw elements. And I think the mystery of it is something I appreciated because, particularly with these golden age heroes, Batman, Superman, like from the 30s and 40s, people get stuck on whether it's fans or creatives in adhering to very standard like portrayals of the universe in general. Like, yeah, Gotham sucks, but how much does Gotham suck doesn't really get divulged into significantly. And one of the there are a bunch of elements from this film that I really appreciated being from more modern comic books, particularly with the Waynes being as messed up as they are, with Martha Wayne, her birth name being
Yeah.
Martha Arkham, and that element where there may or may not have been some corruption, even with the Waynes, and that leads to such a
Mhm.
phenomenal scene. And I'm one of my biggest criticisms is Andy Serkis does a great job as this Alfred, but he's not in the movie enough.
Yeah.
And
I
that
know. I
element,
kinda that was another thing for me that was sort of like sort of cringy on the Robert Pattinson Batman was just like hit Batman's best work and best discoveries came as a result of Alfred. And
yeah,
Andy Serkis's performances again were incredible, and he did such a good job, and he added a lot of weight to that. But just like, he's like, "Oh, I stayed up all night, and here you go. Here's the solution to your thing." And then he's just like, "Yeah, okay, great, thanks." I don't know.
yeah.
It was a contrast I wasn't prepared for, but yeah, Andy Serkis was incredible.
But I think that leads some credence to what I said earlier, where in like up until that final conversation with Alfred, he's looking at him as the help, right? Like, yeah, this guy's raised
Yeah.
me. He taught me to fight. Like, he is, for all intents and purposes, a tool on my mission, right? He doesn't see him as like this human being and realizing like I thought I had lost anything and I wasn't afraid to lose anything till I realized I almost lost you is something where it'll be interesting when you I don't even know if I can say this. No, I am no, I'm not going to say it because then we do have a shared thread with James. So I don't want to eventually get in trouble for this because at some point I would shouldn't say it's been figured out, but there may be potential where I show up on jump on the Bat-Wagon for a Superman episode. We put it into the universe, we'll see if it happens. And if it doesn't, that's okay. But
I know James and I have talked that a little bit, but I know we got
yeah,
a list we're working through at the moment. So yeah, just
yes.
hang out. You'll be
And
there.
I'm looking forward to it. And so, shout out to Warner Brothers who sent me an additional copy of Superman the Animated Series because my disc one wasn't working. So thank you, Warner Brothers Home Media. But
Another great story you can hear on the Mask of the Phantasm episode.
here we go, ding ding, plug. And so I, I'm, ugh. So yeah, I the Riddler works for me. I particularly with truly the madness you get to see from Paul Dano in the scene when they're in the Arkham State Hospital, which is not yet Arkham Asylum. I want to talk about the Penguin because this
Yeah.
character is Colin Farrell in more recent films for me just shows up, steals every scene, and I go, I want more. I think we talked about off the podcast his character of Coach in The Gentleman, where there's just Google Colin Farrell, the Coach diner scene from The Gentleman, and it's absolutely incredible. And then him to be unrecognizable as this character and this real New York gangster, I'm so happy he's getting a show.
I literally didn't know it was him until checking out the cast afterwards because I knew nothing. I didn't know this was a Riddler episode until whatever the first slight hint that there was a Riddle involved. I was like, "Is Riddler in this? Is this a Riddler thing?" And like everybody was in this. Everybody was in this movie. But yeah, Penguin had he had a good amount of screen time and he was fantastic up until the last moment where you see him get left behind. under that bridge or wherever he is. It's just
Yeah.
like,
El
oh, he
Rata?
nailed it.
Like, yeah. No one
Yeah, yeah,
speak
oh my god, and,
Espanol?
like, the Spanish lesson, it was so good. Oh, it was so good.
Yeah, I'm baffled that they got I'm just again, some people take it as you want, and that's fine, which is like he's one of Hollywood's most beautiful men, and for him to be hidden under this, quite frankly, it's what if you beat up Richard Kind with an ugly stick is kind of like what the makeup is. Um, that's not an
I
insult
mean,
at Richard Kind, but the voice of Bing Bong from Inside Out and nothing else. Who's your friend who likes to play Bing Bong, Bing Bong? But that the world that we get explored in this is it there is more going on than we get to see, and I like that where this is like a a capsule of one particular event, but there's a lot of other things going on, and not everything is answered. The the
mm,
city at the very end of the movie is flooded, and that's similar to Batman Year Zero, which was a comic book in the New 52 run where Riddler was involved with the city being flooded. And so
oh, wow, cool.
The Penguin show, which is in production, is going to essentially be about the power vacuum since Carmen Falcone has been killed. And I
It's
don't know
something
if you
they
know
mentioned
this,
that too in the film.
but the character traditionally has that scar on his face. And so it's given to him by Catwoman, who is his daughter in this version, who is eventually in her year one attire by the end of the film with the like bustier and the leather pants. And
Oh,
I really like that you in having Catwoman in the film and similar to a it's not I wouldn't say dissimilar, but not exactly the same to the version in BTAS where they are they have similar missions, but she's willing to go much farther than Batman is. And that
mhm.
relationship, boy, it's steamy, particularly on that skyscraper building that the bat signals on.
Oh, that's another one of those, like, I watched the thing happening.
Mhm.
I'm sorry to be such a contrarian. I
No, go
watched it
ahead.
happening, and I was just like, "Oh, Selena Kyle and Bruce had much better chemistry in BTAS." Like, it just felt stronger, and this to me felt I wasn't as convinced by it. Like, I was like, "Yes, that is what's happening," but it didn't feel like at no point did I was like, "Oh, now they're gonna smooch or whatever." It just seemed
Sure.
kind of like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that's what's going on now, great."
Do you think there? So I'm curious. Do you think it's be due to a lack of screen time together, or it's just the performances back and forth didn't work for you?
I think it was the performances back and forth. Like,
Okay,
even the first time that they kissed, like, it was like they're getting closer, and I was like, "Are they really?" And then they ended up kissing, and I just I was like, "Why? Why? Why did they?" Like, I didn't feel like there wasn't enough for me leading up to it
okay,
to
that's
show their
fair.
relationship reaching that point. By the end of it, when they were going like that, there's a that beautiful shot where they're riding on the roads together and they're different bikes, and then they like split off and go opposite directions. Like that, was that had some emotional weight to it where they'd like been through enough together.
Mhm.
But before that, it was kind of like, maybe it's just how they do things. I don't know, but I wasn't as convinced by it.
Yeah, I think so. I my read into it was initially it's kind of like, wow, we're both really sexy. Like that's pretty much it. Well, because like they don't have any like. I mean, he's a peeping tom at one point when he's trying to figure out
Oh
exactly
my
who she
god, is
is.
he ever? But no, and like that being said, like I loved the binocular scenes. I love, love, love long takes. And so the fact that this
Mhm.
movie had some like minute and a half long shots, a lot of them within the binoculars, and there's a lot of like stage choreography you could see going on. Like I really appreciated that. But yeah, man, was that gross. He's just like, well,
Yeah.
she's undressing and I'm just gonna keep watching.
Yeah. It's for a mission. I'm not a perv. Uh
This is totally for science.
yeah, I'm vengeance. One sequence I want to get your opinion on because it never gets old for me, even though it was in the trailers, which is when Batman breaks into the iceberg lounge at the very end and all of the choreography lit down the hallway is with gunfire.
Yeah, I liked it. I liked it a lot. It was there's another okay, there's something there's a gripe I had with this film that maybe it was a nod to it. I hope it was a nod and not just like blatant like plagiarism. Um, did you realize how many times this movie had almost direct like shot for shots from the movie The Crow?
No. So I have seen that film once, and I think you brought it up on Mask of the Phantasm on Jump on the Batwagon. That
It's the
again,
only movie I've ever watched.
yeah, I saw The Crow, I watched Over the Garden Wall, and I watched DCEU. I watched nothing else. There's nothing else that exists to me. I'm Brian.
No, no, it got to the point where I was literally taking notes about parallels of stuff that was
Mhm.
either eerily similar or like, no, no, that's the same shot. So,
I'm curious. No, so that's interesting that that's the case. I mean, what will be even more curious is they're remaking The Crow. I don't know if you knew that.
oh,
Um,
come on.
yeah, I mean nothing's
Why?
recognizable IP, Brian. This is the world we live in now.
I
Um,
know, man. That's rough.
so okay, that's so I'm gonna do some work on. We've talked about this prior to the episode being recorded that I've been behind on a lot of things. I'm still gonna watch
Mhm.
Over the Golden Garden Wall. I have it to watch in a totally legally fashion. So I'm gonna do that, and I will text you about that later. And then I
I
will
look
also
for like
rewatch The Crow.
feel free to give me play by plays on Over the
Oh,
Garden
I will.
Wall.
You will. Trust me. No, that's interesting. And I think certainly given the aesthetic of this version of Bruce with the pale skin and the dark. Yeah, I'm curious for me it was if anything felt as if Matt Reeves was like I want David Fincher to be my cinematographer, right? And
Uh-huh.
like the neo noir elements particularly with the diner sequence when Edward is slash Riddler is arrested.
Mhm.
One thing that I loved, because even though he's in every version, I would say the most he participates is probably the Nolan films with Gary Oldman's Gordon. I love Jeffrey Wright in general as an actor, and getting a more like beat cop version who's like, I'm just trying to do the right thing, man. Like that's just his point of view. And he sees Batman as this like assistant for vengeance. And even like he drops some of the best humor when
Oh,
Or
yeah.
when Batman lifts it up, he's like thumb drive. He's like, "Oh, this guy's hilarious." Like it's just
Yeah.
this dry wit, and where he's like, the perspective at least that I absorbed from Jeffrey's portrayal of this character is I can't believe what's happening is happening, but I just got to go with it, or I'm probably gonna lose my mind. Like,
Uh-huh. He
right?
was great. There's another gripe I have with the movie that it reminded me of. Did you realize that there was like maybe only 2 people in the whole film who did something other than whisper the entire time?
Well, obviously
Almost
it's Penguin doesn't whisper,
right.
right? Come on, El Rata Lada.
Uh-huh.
Uh, well, okay, so not whispering.
Yeah.
I finished the movie 2 hours ago, so I should be able to do this. Uh, Anya doesn't whisper for sure because she screams she's being murdered.
Oh,
Um,
that's true. That's true.
right.
Main
Gordon doesn't
characters
whisper.
anyway.
I would say I think there. I would say it's 50-50. If I like put like if I have to, every cop yells for sure. Gil Colson, the district attorney who's not Harvey Dent. Did that throw you for a loop when it was like Gil
Ye
Colson's the DEA? You're like, where's Harvey?
It
Harvey,
was I don't know. I didn't feel I didn't feel like I was necessarily missing Harvey, especially
no.
since he got
Okay.
his head all blown up, but no, it's just for the most part, Riddler is the one who
Oh, he obviously
whispers the
yells a
least.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's because he's yelling. But for me, it's just we've gotten to that point where like every like if a movie's supposed to be tense, just everybody whispers the whole time. And it for me, it's like that's not reality. You guys just had a 5-minute conversation on camera and there's no reason for you to be whispering. Like when they're in the police precinct and you got Gordon and Batman like whispering at what they're gonna do, fine, whisper. But the fact
I
that
love that sequence.
every it's really good, isn't it?
And okay, so One of the elements that I like the balance of this film is like it maintains the ridiculous we know we're based on a comic book with like the wingsuit appearing out of nowhere. But something I
Yeah,
didn't realize how much I would love it as in terms of Batman being a tactician is the grappling gun. Yes, we all know. I think everyone would accept that like Batman's physique is likely that of like an Olympian. And we talked about shirtless Kevin Conroy's Batman in Mask of the Phantasm. Like, yeah,
yeah,
you look like that. You never wear shirts. But
yeah.
even in given that, if he were to swing by one arm, his arm would rip off. Like that's like no one's arm tendons are that strong or dislocate, and then that's a whole thing. But
Yeah, there was a couple times where there's things that I loved the reality, like showing the grappling gun, like catching on a radiator and then
yeah,
climbing up, like awesome. 'Cause so many times it's like, oh, you shoot it onto the roof and we just climb up and it's great. So like there's some good reality there. Batman in a wingsuit, uh slamming at like terminal velocity into the underside of a bridge, like and then just getting up, like maybe that's a little less
yeah.
realistic.
Well, particularly with the grappling gun, though, like to continue on that, is the fact that
Mm,
it's built into the arms of both of his gloves. Also, I think they've talked about this in the making of because I've watched the behind the scenes where in their minds, like they don't show it fully, but that with it being built into the suit, it allows for a body harness to be built. So it's not just pulling on his arms. And also, it allows for, I love the climax in the arena because you get to see what I'm hoping in the future with Batman, him using things around him
mhm.
to, like, he doesn't have smoke grenades. So he's like, oh, fire extinguishers, bang, bang, bang. Like, we're going to blow those up. And using the grappling guns to use people as counterweights or literally like Scorpion, get over here. And
Yeah.
right? And he uses an actual bat to beat up those two or beat up the twins and the cop in the iceberg lounge. Like the way the fighting style of this is just brutal. And I'm curious if that'll change at all, given how it's like at this point in his career, he's not trying to hurt people,
Right.
right?
Right.
Particularly with
He
that
doesn't wanna
crew in the
use
beginning.
guns. He makes a
Yeah.
point to be like, "No guns," and he's,
Yeah.
like, trying not to,
But deep
end people's
puncture
lives.
wounds from my grappling guns, a okay.
Totally fine.
Well, and we talked about
Also,
that. Go ahead.
I was gonna say one other man, bad move on the filmmaker's part for me. Um, hey, Max, it's dog time apparently.
It's dog
Um,
time. It's dog time. Brian has dogs at his house. It's dog time. It's Max.
um, it is Max. Hi, bud. But yeah, the thing like I was as everything was ramping up and you had the new mayor who's a black woman and they have all these like snipers basically. And I was watching, I'm like, oh, it's gonna be interesting to see how they get around this because like obviously they're not gonna be thick skulled enough to like shoot a black lady on screen. Like they wouldn't do that. That'd be in really poor taste. And then she gets shot, and I'm like, you guys,
It's so I it
don't
is
do it.
there I completely agree. It is one of those elements that unfortunate to delay after delay after delay and coming from somebody who has a partial Asian background where when this came out and the subway patron at the very beginning being of Asian descent. They're two things that it's really unfortunate that I would say in obviously minorities in general have clearly had issues and continue so with how they're treated by law enforcement and the pandemic being
Yeah,
specifically towards the Asian communities. But I certainly felt more sensitive typically to those
yeah,
things because of the consistent fashion, which unfortunately it's happening to more regularly, particularly in the United States. And one of the elements that I felt more uncomfortable with was the group of extremists working for the Riddler, right? Like all the people and one of the guys being the guy at the very end that Bruce beats the ever living bejesus out of, he
yeah,
speaks to at the funeral, right? Like Paul Dano is the Riddler, but his like he's developed this cult of extremists. And like
yeah.
post 2016 and continuing onward, like, yes, that
It's
is
just
our
a little too
reality, but
fresh.
it's whoa.
Yeah,
It's those scenes were uncomfortable.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I had a similar thought with, like, he's, like, online message boards and, like, live broadcasting things, and it's like, yeah, it is just a perfect it's not even a metaphor, it's like, "No, no, this is just what we're experiencing." Like, this
Yeah.
is the US for sure.
Hmm.
Um, which, I don't know, I guess it doesn't have to not be, but
And
yeah.
Gotham historically sucks, so it
Yeah.
would continue to suck. Um, I'm curious. I'm trying to think of so elements moving forward where Catwoman is likely not present. One of the things that I want to get your opinion on is
Mm.
that there's been a lot of chatter, particularly around what may happen in the sequel. Now, if there's anything you wanted to say about this film in general, we can do that now before we get to what I want to say. Do you have anything else, or do you want to?
Let me check my notes here.
He's got notes,
Um,
people. He came
man, yeah, I
prepared.
didn't I just it was it was a lot. There was a lot there, and I didn't wanna miss things.
That's fair.
I should have taken a tally of how many times they played Ave Maria, but,
I think it's like 4 or 5.
100?
It's
Um
so the stupid people understand.
And then Paul Dano's gotta sing it at the end. No, no, let's go, let's talk about sequels.
So it's what's really curious to me is given everything going on with the DC universe as a whole on the filmmaking side, James Gunn is now in charge of the DC shared universe, but this was a big success. And they're like, well, they're making the Penguin show, they're making the Batman Part 2. And one thing the internet seems to want, and I kind of want to see it given how I don't even know how to describe how messy this Gotham is that
Yeah.
we know we are getting serial I mean I'm calling him a serial killer because in for the shared universe we're getting Damian Wayne who is Bruce's biological son in the comics, which is my least
Oh,
favorite Robin
wow.
of all time. I don't even want to get into it. It just makes me
Cool.
sad. And so everybody wants to see like child Dick Grayson as Robin to emphasize the ludicrousness of a child crime fighter. And I kind of want to see that.
Ooh. Wait, you want to see that?
I kind of do
Uh-huh.
because one of the things, and I think it's a complete, like, not child, maybe like 13, well, legally a child, but like a preteen, is our only versions of Robin in live action films. He's just a man. He's just a slightly younger man than Bruce Wayne. Like, Chris O'Donnell is 25 and he's adopted by Val Kilmer in Batman Forever. And it's
Who's, like, 31.
yeah, it's like I'm your mentor. Like you listen to me. It's like, why am I adopted? I'm 25. Like it doesn't like
Oh,
it
I would
doesn't
be
like
it'd be interesting to see, but I wonder how they would go about that introduction. Because if they're, like, kind of about subverting the, like, normal expectations of origin stories, then, would they circumvent the whole, like, circus upbringing thing, and maybe he's just a kid who's, like, does parkour or something? Like, what would that
you know
be?
what? That honestly, if he's a YouTuber who does parkour, why not? But in terms of elements that I really liked about this film, I, I liked Bruce having essentially seeing himself in the mayor's son, right? And what does that mean
Mm,
particularly, and going back to I'm going to plug again, it's just plugging an old episode, but when I talked about my favorite episode of Batman the animated series of all time, Robin's Reckoning Part 1, and just so you know, so I don't have to do this next time I have you on the podcast, I'm working on my Superman list as I go through the episodes, so I don't have to do it off the fly. But
attaboy.
Dick Grayson being full of vengeance towards Biff Tannen from Back to the Future, or whoever's responsible for killing his parents. I think that would be really interesting to explore a Batman who's just let go of the vengeance being his goal and trying to prevent this kid from having the same upbringing could be really interesting.
I mean, he kinda did that with Selina in this, though, didn't he?
I guess, but again, she's like they're the same age. So it's like he has this relationship with the mayor's son without having to say anything, and I really like that, particularly after he sets off the flare. The first person to go to him in all the
is their
rubble
son.
is the boy, right? And so
Yeah.
can Batman knows he needs to be the symbol of hope, but what does that mean for somebody he's has a personal relationship with? That's something I would like to be explored, and I think it only really works when it's not a 25-year-old man that you adopt.
Uh-huh.
Right? It's like you adopting James. It just doesn't make sense. Like you're 98 years old
Oh,
and James is
well.
32, but even still, I got it in. There you go. That one's for you. Jump on the back. I didn't get it in the last episode. All right, I just got to finish checking off jump off the Bat-Wagon bingo and
Jump off the Bat-Wagon now.
jump
You've
off the
gone back to
Bat-Wagon.
it.
Yeah, go back to it. Hi Dylan Pollock. And we're done. Covering everything I wanted to cover. But yeah, that's stuff that I would like to see. Again, I think listening to this, it's clear I enjoyed it more than you, but I think that's the having such particular versions of the character. There is going to be it's either going to work for you and it's not, or maybe it's kind of more in the
Totally.
middle. And I think what I'm more optimistic about, and I'm so glad that I had you on to have this conversation, is you're giving me things to think about that I don't think I had thought about. Like I'm now
Mm,
going to go back and rewatch The Crow, and how is that going to affect my viewing of this? And it's I would say it's almost reverse to some degree, where that doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. Like steal from the best is typically what a lot of filmmakers say if you're going to do it. Dune being a massive inspiration for Star Wars, if you're unaware of that. And I can watch the original Star Wars or Episode 4 A New Hope if you're an old or a young person who wants to use the whole title. It's just Star Wars, but that's besides the point. But then Denis Villeneuve goes and makes Dune, and it's an incredible movie. And I don't feel that, even though I know these things are connected, they couldn't be more different from each other. There's certainly
right.
moody elements to this that I know I'm going to look at slightly differently, but The Crow was such an influential comic book film and had to unfortunately be made through such tragedy that I'm curious to see, given how this has such a particular vision, where it being this Chinatown David Fincher esque seven uh, crime thriller, what does that
Uh-huh.
mean moving forward? Like, do we get more of a bombastic action film, or there's been a lot of talk potentially of maybe leaning into horror elements with something like Clayface or The Court of Owls. There's a lot of room to explore in this particular Batman universe that is so
Mhm.
distinctly its own that moving forward, I know I'm looking forward to it, but I'm curious now that there's a Penguin show that eventually will be made. I know they were in the
Mhm.
midst of shooting it. It's supposed to come out. It would probably wind up coming out at the end of 2024 if we're lucky. Like, are you curious to explore more of this Batman world?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I with my gripes and, Brian has opinions, uh, kind of modality,
There's
um,
the next T-shirt. I'm gonna get that
I'm still
made. Film realist. Brian has opinions, and they'll be like, "Who's
that's like
Brian?"
that's actually like a meme in my household, and, like, my dear
There you
friend
go.
Kimmy, hi Rose, so, like, I'll just be going off on my, like, New England kinda tirades about something, and she'll just kinda, like, chime in, "Oh, Bry's got opinions again." Like, "Yeah, I know." But, yeah, no, I think it was still really artfully done, and I think there's a lot to appreciate about it, and I think there's um a lot that they could lean into, and like you said, Clayface, like, oh my god, I'd love to see Clayface in some kind of live action thing, and if you could lean into the horror of it, I think that'd be perfect. Just don't kill
And
him
then
again.
you stole my joke, and the Batman just kills him for no reason.
No, just
Uh,
kicks him into a lake or something.
yes.
Hi,
So
girl.
no, I'm really glad we had this conversation. I'm gonna be I was admittedly, as soon as you said I have things to say, I said all I hope is he didn't hate it, because then the conversation is gonna be a little more difficult to have. But I think your completely fair criticism is definitely elements of the movie that are there. Like that particular version of these characters is either going to work or it's not, but I like the fact that even given that, like you've said, you want to explore it more, and so I'm glad we have the opportunity to do so. So
Yeah,
if
well,
you
thanks
haven't
for giving
checked
me
the
the
Batman
reason
out,
to. What's that?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say if you haven't checked out the Batman yet, it is, as I said, available on places. But I that's one of the reasons I love comic book characters in general is that it's for me an avenue to get to talk about characters that explore themes you probably wouldn't necessarily like you wouldn't get the same audience to go to see the same or to get to see a movie not about or a film about just some random guy killing a bunch of people and then learning not to probably doesn't get butts in seats. But when you can
Yeah.
wrap these elements of traditional storytelling, and there's only so many stories under the sun, however there may be, um having these comic book characters explore these different avenues and share such unique tones from each other, where the Dark Knight universe is pretty much like what if Batman but Heat, and then you had kind of a more gritty expansive universe with the Ben Affleck ones, and then you get the Batman universe, which is much more I wouldn't say neo, but noir at certainly. And so it's a character that can certainly stand the test of time with with these different versions, and I'm glad that they are there. Brian, thank you so much for being on the episode. I really appreciate it. Brian, of course, if you haven't been listening and you're just listening to the outro of the episode, can be found co-hosting Jump on the Bat-Wagon with new episodes Friday at 1 p.m. for me. I think that's when they come out Eastern Standard Time.
Yeah, I think it's
Uh,
yeah, it's 10 PST, 10 a.m. PST.
yeah, and so you can look them out or look for those episodes there. If you want to make Brian happy, just watch Over the Garden Wall and then send him messages about it, because
Yes,
I know
please.
he will enjoy that. Um, I hesitantly am going to say next week's episode will be about. Yeah, you know what? It'll work. I'm going to be covering the first season of Gen V, the spinoff of the Boys television series. As I told Brian earlier, I am behind on everything, so I'm looking forward to watching the back half of that because I did enjoy the first half. I quite enjoy the worlds that Eric Kripke uh, cultivates, so I'm looking forward to finishing that. So you can look forward to that. That show is, of course, available on Amazon Prime. None of these streaming services are sponsors of any kind. I don't have any sponsors of any kind, but this way I can let
But
you
you
know where you can
should.
well, thank you. You're so kind. I maybe one day. But so yes, this episode was our Halloween Batman themed episode. Have a safe and happy
Woohoo!
Halloween. And you can send your Halloween costumes to me on Twitter, Instagram, Hive, Vero, and Threads. Film Realists is there. Um, on all of those things. That's where you can look for clips of funny things we do in the video version of the podcast. There isn't a video version to be shared because I don't have time to edit that, but I have time to edit the audio. So follow all the places there. And if you're a Spotify listener, I put a question in every episode. So if you want to have some interaction with the show, you can always send in a question or a letter. The email is also listed in the podcast show notes. So if you want to reach me, you can. I'm there. I am Kyle Naranya, the film realist, and I've been fortunately rejoined by, I'm just going to call him special returning guest, Brian Maneely.
Thanks, buddy. Glad to
Oh,
be
you're
here.
welcome. I'm glad to have Brian here, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Film Realist podcast, and I hope to see you next week.